Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to my weekly behind-the-scenes DM-only live stream, Crafting Icewind Dale, which I build, write, and prepare for our next session of Rime of the Frost Maiden. These videos are super spoiler heavy. We are going behind the scenes, behind the curtain. You're going to see my entire process for building our campaign. So if you would like to be surprised or go into the sessions new, like a newborn babe, please do not watch these streams. Instead, you want to watch our actual session streams, which will begin in a few weeks if you're watching this live. And obviously, if you are a player character, which I don't know, I know who my players are, but not what characters they're playing yet as of this stream, you can definitely not watch these. But for the rest of you, welcome. We stream our D&D sessions live on YouTube every Friday evening. You can watch all of our D&D live series, as well as reviews and Let's Plays on my YouTube channel. You can read weekly session recaps at roguewatson.com. You can follow me on Twitter at roguewatson and join our official Discord server. Invite link in the description below. If you would like to support the channel, check out patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to my platinum patrons, Joe, Will, Time Dancer, Manuel, Wizard, Princess, Christopher, Star Loverly, Thomas, Ian, Captain Mike, Jeremy, Adam, and Leroy. And gold patrons, RPG Paper Crafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcos, Dade, Vicente, Gilberto, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Ross, Limpy Spuds, Jerome, Fatboy 619, Scalenia, Nick, Farney, McButterpants, Blood Angel, Veronis, and the Fireworks Factory. Thank you all very much for your support. I am excited to start talking about my campaign. So to put this into context, we stopped Tomb of Annihilation. We finished it about 9 months ago. Coincidentally, I have a 9-month-old. Chris graciously has expressed interest in doing another campaign since we've been kind of going back and forth between the two of us. I want to do a shorter campaign and a high-level campaign, which is what we've been playing now. We're fixing to wrap up War for the Lost Plane. And then I am back in the DM's chair doing a full-length campaign. I don't know how long it'll end up being. Two ended up being 2 years. I don't know how long this one will be, but we'll see. I do plan on expanding it, and we'll get into that as well. Right now, let's talk about the scheduling, which is we've got I believe, our final episode of our current campaign tomorrow. We're going to do an epilogue on the 23rd, which I realize is going to be confusing and nonsensical if people are watching this months down the line, years down the line, whatever. But let me get through this. And then we're going to start our session 0 for this campaign on April 30th, which is in 2 weeks. Session 1, obviously the week after that, May 7th. So that's when you want to mark your calendars. April 30th, session 0, which is when we build our, I've already know my players. We don't really need to go through a bunch of, stuff other than new house rule changes. And we build our characters during session 0. So that's definitely a fun one to watch. And then session 1 will actually, obviously, start the campaign. This crafting series will go week to week. And I'm starting this a little bit early so I get a chance to do some pre-campaign prep streams with all of you. So we can go over a lot of the changes I'm making and keep it kind of overarching for the whole campaign. And then once we get into the actual week-to-week planning, I can focus on, okay, here's this session, here's the encounter I need to build, here's the tokens, here's the map, let's go over this. So you'll see more of a minute focus on individual sessions, and I'm going to try to organize the craftings a little better than I did for Tomb, because in Tomb it was just, crafting 8:30, crafting 9:07, or whatever, it was just the date. But here I'm going to try to make more sense where it's going to be like, okay, I'm crafting the Foaming Mugs quest here, or I'm designing, Id Ascendant here, or whatever else. So it'll be a little more easier to follow along with kind of what the topic is. But for now, for the next, what is it? This week, next week, week 3. Technically, we have 4 weeks until session 1, but that week I'll be probably planning session 1 specifically. So really, we've got like 2 to 3 weeks of just planning the overarching campaign, just kind of going over a lot of the changes I'm making, and I have been blessed with having a lot of time to prep for this campaign. Those of you might have seen my DM guide videos I posted a few months ago, where I kind of made generic observations based on my reading of the book in terms of the, things to watch out for and the changes and things. But some of that might have been specific to my campaign, but this, obviously, stream is very much specific to my campaign. So we're going to talk about the changes I'm making, the story changes, and hopefully I will know who my players are going to play obviously before session 0, and then that can be probably a whole crafting episode, is just talking about how to incorporate those players. Because one thing I do feel was successful in my last campaign, which was Tomb of Annihilation, was incorporating my player characters and their stories into the campaign, making sure they all had individual quest arcs and reasons to be in Schult. And I want to do a similar thing here. The problem is, I don't know who any of those characters are right now, so I can't prepare for any of that. And that's would hopefully be a major part of the campaign. So everything you're seeing now, I don't know what my players are going to be, so I'm not incorporating any of that yet. But I'm trying to do all the other prep work that I can. Hello, everybody. I am following the chat. Aubrey, I saw you were in there very first. Hopefully you can make it for another one. Michael, hello. No fun. Session 1, Avalanche falls and kills the PCs. Avalanches, it could be a lot of fun. Definitely want to do mountain climb at some point. I know. I am Pegleg Smith. I agree. I am 100% going to make that error at one point. I'm going to introduce this as Crafting Annihilation, because that just rolled off the tongue very well, too. Crafting Icewind Dale is going to take me a second to get through. Chris does do an amazing job, Jeff. I agree. It's been a really fun campaign. He is so talented when it comes to, I mean, you can tell who the theater kid was in our group. And to do an entire homebrew campaign is still extremely daunting for me, which is why a lot of reason I chose Rime of the Frost Maiden. I've got a lot going on in my life anyway, but it's just a lot. It's so helpful, and obviously using Roll20, to just have those maps, have the tokens, have the resources, have the basic structure, and then I can come in and fiddle with it. It's like I would prefer, if I was a music artist, like remixing other songs versus completely composing something anew or making a new arrangement or something, which is really how I feel like I'm doing with these. So I'm keeping, a lot of stuff intact, a lot of the basic story beats, but Rime does have some problems that we need to go through. Hello, Lumpy and Jerome. Good to see you all. Obviously recognizing a lot of names in here, which is always fun. So, Rime of the Frost Maiden. And maybe you all got a chance to see, I actually technically started doing crafting last week. I did a private patron-only stream and kept it private for patrons up until, I think, yesterday, and then I released it publicly, so you can all see my initial stream there. I'll probably go over pretty much a lot of the same stuff here, but this way allows me to kind of answer and talk to questions a little more directly with all of you. So, the basic plot structure obviously takes place in the Icewind Dale region, which we have been before. My players and I, we were there, which is unfortunate because it would be fun if it was an all-new region like Schult. Or maybe not. Maybe it's fun to recognize, like, hey, by the way, we were here before. We've actually established this area in a previous campaign, which was not my campaign. It was Chris's Storm King's Thunder campaign, which is a very popular one on the channel. We went to Bryn Shander. We did a little bit of events there. In fact, I think we actually met, I want to say, 2 of the NPCs that are even in Rime of the Frost Maiden, which is the speaker and the sheriff of Bryn Shander, and we defended them from frost giants and everything. And we even bummed around 10 Towns a little bit. We did a couple of quests and things, so there is precedent for actually being here. But this one, similar to Tomb, entirely takes place in one region, which is kind of how I like to build a campaign. I like giving the players an area to explore. That's fun. But I don't want to do the Storm King's Thunder thing and let them pop around like all over the Forgotten Realms. It's just way too daunting for me, and it's too much stress to try to put together all those maps and things. Give me that one like central area, whether that's the Strahd Barovia section or whatever else, but or the Dasaran Valley for princes. Give me that area, and then you can populate that region full of things for the players to look at. So I don't like you can do the open world, but zoom in a little bit to where I can handle it. So the plot is divided up into 3 stories that really don't have a whole lot to do with each other, and it's very disappointing, especially because Auril the Frost Maiden is on the cover of the book. So you think maybe she's the big bad, because there's precedent for the person on the cover of the campaign book to be the big bad, like Strahd or Tiamat or Serac. All those folks are on the cover. Auril is, as written, really not the big bad of the campaign at all. It's almost like you just kind of do it on your way to other things. It's extremely disappointing. I will say the first third of the story is pretty well done. You've got the tent, which we're going to go ahead and flip over to that, so you don't have to stare at this cover page. I do really like the Icewind Dale map. The first third, I think, works very well and is probably going to need the least amount of work. Turn down my brightness since the Icewind, the snow, it's reflecting off the snow. I think the first third requires the least amount of work on my end because it's a modular design. So it says, hey, here's 10 towns, here's 10 quests. And then chapter 2 is like, here's another, whatever it is, dozen quests that just happens to be in the region, not necessarily in 10 towns. Which is awesome because then DMs can just pick and choose whatever quests you want to run. And you can build your own story from there. But it's not just that. It still has a main story plot. You know, even every open world game you play still has a main story plot. Now, technically in those games you could, you know, there's people that play Skyrim and completely ignore the dragon thing. That's fine. That's not going to be fine here. The main plot in the first third is the Dwargar. They're basically just opportunistic. They showed up and said, oh, the region is, which I guess I skipped that part. The region is blanketed in permanite, which is the big catastrophe. Again, similar to Tomb, where the catastrophe in Tomb was the death curse. Here it's just permanent nightfall, which is, you know, something people understand as being bad and kind of an ecological disaster. And the Dwargar are, underground living dwarves, Underdark, and they have that sunlight sensitivity. So obviously being in a region of permanite would be pretty good for them. And they've just taken advantage of the situation. They've kind of invaded the surface, but not. They're building their army, basically. They've got, they can turn invisibility at will, which, by the way, is an awesome ability for an enemy to have. Invisibility at will, holy shit, for every one of these minions. They've been stealing bits of Chardalyn, which we can go into Chardalyn. And they're working on building a awesome giant dragon construct to unleash on 10 towns. And it actually does unleash on the 10 towns, and that is a huge climax. And that's just the first third. So it really kind of has its own beginning, middle, and end zone for that, level 1 through 6 or whatever it is, which is great. So, I mean, obviously I'll do some minute details on which ones I want to run and everything, but that one feels well designed. I think that one probably has the least amount of issues because it's still daunting to run because you get to pick all the different quests and things, but I think that has a lot of cool things going on, and I love that climax of, it feels like Zardarok feels like a Bond villain, like a classic Bond villain, where he just has this scheme and just throws the lever and this dragon comes out. Like, it's so cool. And then it turns into this big epic, fantasy moment of this, or almost like a superhero moment, really. I'm picturing like the villain at the end of the first Thor movie who can do that giant radiant beam. Was it the Destroyer? That's how this dragon works. Just flies around. It's almost like a fucking alien attack, really, with the way that it's flying around, just destroying things. All of that is awesome, and I'm really keeping all of that intact. We can go over which quests I want to do specifically and when, but I like a lot of that. Which was your favorite campaign to run? Michael, let's see. Out of, what do we do? Lost Mine, Princes, Tomb, I think is the only ones I've run. So I don't, it's not too, I mean, obviously, I think Tomb worked best because of the knowledge I had gained from being a DM. I still have a lot of regrets for Tomb, as I mentioned, I think, in my last stream. I didn't do pacing very well. I kept players too low a level for too long, and it shouldn't have been a 2-year-long campaign. I mean, 2 years to end up at level 11 by the end, I don't think was very well done. But partly that's because of the campaign is designed for the jungle, crawl being only tier 1. It was my first time doing a hex crawl, which I don't want to repeat that. So, some issues there, but honestly, I mean, Tomb was such a fun idea. I love the theme, so I think I have to vote Tomb. Even though Lost Mine is still my recommendation for excellent introduction to D&D for sure. But, it's a lot of people's first campaign, and you're just going to get better from there. So, love TOA. Yeah, me too. Yes, Dwargar, Arl, and the Lost City. So, I'm going to keep most of that intact, but I'm not obviously going to try to, and I don't think it's designed to run all of the quests in Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. If you look at the level scaling, it doesn't make any sense to run all of those. I think on average, which I'd like to know from you all what your thoughts are on how many to run, but it seems like maybe half would be plenty for the heroes to, become familiar with 10 towns, become established with the region, and really get to know the people and feel a sense of pride in working for them, which I'll get into how I'm going to set that up. But it seems like you only need to run like half of these quests. Otherwise, you risk, keeping players in those low levels for too long. And I'll get back to that in a second. So I want to go over my full plans here. The second part, which is the oral part, is the most problematic of this campaign because Tier 1, that first third, is chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right? Chapter 1 is 10 towns. Chapter 2 is just the Icewind Dale region. Chapter 3 is Sunblight, which is the Dwargar fortress. And then Chapter 4 is very short. It just covers the dragon destroying 10 towns and the players having to thwart that, which that's really left up in the air for how DMs handle that. That's going to be an exciting bit of crafting to figure out how we're going to work that out when we get there. This second one is only Chapter 5. And it's terrible because the players meet an NPC, Valen Harpel, who's a cool NPC. I plan on using her. She knows everything. It's an embarrassingly badly written section of the adventure because an NPC just shows up and says, "Hey, here's all of the information you need to solve the main quest." Where the fuck you been, lady? Here's Aurel's behind everything. Which I guess, I don't. The players just know that from the beginning, or somebody knows that, like, I know what it is. They can see her, right? They can, like, see her flying across the sky, and so they already know, like, she's doing this. And the motivation behind it is really dumb, where she's just doing it because, like, there's just no reason for it. Aurel is horribly written. It's to where, like, oh, she's a god, so she's inscrutable, and, doesn't really talk to anybody, and it's like, what? That doesn't make for a fun D&D campaign. Look back at, like, why do we love Greek mythology so much? Because those gods and goddesses are petty little bitches that are just people with a lot of power. It's the whole superhero thing. So I'm very disappointed in all of that. And essentially they just say, they learn that information from Valen. They're like, okay, you need to go to the Island of Solstice, and then over to Grimskala, which is Aurel's base of operations, and then they go beat her up, which it's a cool, like, multi-form boss battle, which is very JRPG, which I like, but it's very disappointing. I like the area is fine, the actual island and the fortress is fine, but all of that is supremely disappointing. So the big changes I'm making is expanding that. What I'm thinking about doing is, because the first third, that first story, the one with the Dwargar and the 10 towns and everything, works so well for Tier 1, I'm expanding the oral section to all of Tier 2. So it's going to be like 6 through 10. But that means I need to add more steps, because we can't just level up all of those levels and just immediately go to the Island of Solstice. So I'm adding multiple steps the players have to accomplish, mainly by pulling some of the content from Chapter 2 into that Tier 2 area. And I'm doing that by expanding the Arcane Brotherhood by a lot. So all of the Arcane Brotherhood members, as written in the book, will be important NPCs, including Nass Lantomir, who is going to be alive and kicking. And in fact, she may be behind a lot of the things going on. Valish Gaunt, who's currently in Revel's End, having been arrested, I'm thinking was the one that actually discovered Ithrin, but was arrested before he could do anything about it, so the players will have to find his laboratory. They'll find the Lost Spire of Netheril that Zahn has been cloning himself with. That will eventually lead to a case where the clones have kind of taken over and they've been cloning themselves, and it's a whole hilarious, like, and the clones slowly get more and more degraded to where they're kind of like mutated and less sentient, to where the last one is probably, and to where they get into like gibbering mouthers and stat blocks and things, to where the last one is like this nasty, like the Thing style. Like I want to go all on with that. So I'm expanding all of that into that second story, and I would love to turn Aurel into a better NPC, to where maybe she becomes the actual quest giver. Maybe they still have to fight her in a classic superhero thing, but then they, free her, or they convince her, whatever happens, to where Aurel's like, okay, now you're going to be my agents. You're going to be my followers. You have no choice, because I'm a fucking god, and I'll smite you. And you need to go to Ithrin and take care of business there, which they will be learning about Ithrin on the way. Now, tier 3, I'll probably keep that one in terms of how it runs, which is the Caves of Hunger and then the Lost City, but obviously be expanding the Lost City. There's a great DM's Guild product that I reviewed not too long ago called the Expanded Towers of Magic, which provides maps and content for every single one of the towers, which is very much like the Omu Shrines, which I plan on using, at least most of them, for Ithrin. And that will all be tier 3. So I'm going to need to level scale the hell out of that region when we get there, to where by the time they're entering the Caves of Hunger, they're like level 11 or 12. And then by the time they've actually getting to the end, which I'm not using a Demi-Lich because we just fought a Serac at the end of Tomb. That seems dumb. Thinking I may actually replace Irolithus with an Elder Brain and go hard with the Brain in the Jar thing. And then still have like Auril show up and maybe try to betray the players at the end and be like, okay, now I need to take the Mythalar to, get infinite cosmic power and have a big showdown there. And all of this is, well in the future. We've got time to plan. But to where the players end up more at level 15. So dividing the story very evenly into tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and each one of the tiers actually has its own beginning, middle, and end story. But they all feed into each other to where it makes sense, not just that they're taking place in the same region, but that one of them leads to the other. For example, maybe Velen has been captured by the Dwergar, so they actually find her in Sunblight, and then she becomes the important NPC for tier 2, and then, like I said, I can use Auril to direct the players to Ithrin, or, they've been finding, where Ithrin is as part of their tier 2 quest, but then they realize they have to go to, Auril's location. Now, there's a lot of information I still need to fit in with there's a lot of question marks, and those of you that are Platinum patrons have access to my Google Docs of all my notes that I've been making, and I have highlighted and like question mark stuff because I do not have everything planned right now. I have the overarching framework that I feel like I want, but individual events I think I don't have. And keep in mind, I'm also leery about over planning too much, because I do want my players to have obviously a say in the story. I do want them to be able to modify and change things, so I need to be able to adapt to that, with the caveat that I still want to have a backstory written. I want a series of events, like how did Vaelish Gaunt end up in prison? What did Nas Lantamir do, and where is she now? To what effect did Auril what is her power set, and how did she blanket the world in Permanite, and what is her relationship to Ithrin? Those are all things that I need to figure out, preferably before the campaign starts. I need to catch up on the chat. I've been talking too much. I didn't like running most of the Chapter 1 quests. Interesting. Already went through all of them at their request, and most of them felt lazily written. Oh, interesting. So, before I continue, the ones that I like, although obviously I will, change as I go. Foaming Mugs, Black Swords, The Unseen, Mead Must Flow, Mountain Climb, and Beautiful Mine are the ones that I'm thinking that we will end up running. Ideally, all of those before Sunblight, because it gets really awkward. How do I do? Yeah, that's another thing we have to talk about, is how do you do, because Sunblight is kind of a weird point of no return for 10 towns, because after Sunblight, the dragon comes in and presumably destroys a lot of 10 towns, and then you completely change, like, we're already in the middle of a catastrophe, which is the Permanite, and now we've got, like, refugees, we've got towns that are burned down, like, I don't care about going off on doing the side quest, it's a weird thing to do story-wise, and I don't know if there's not a good way, like a video game might just pop up and say like, hey, make sure you get all your side quests done before you go here. I don't know of a good way of doing that in D&D other than saying like, well, because the players wouldn't know, they wouldn't know like going to Sunblight would trigger this big catastrophe, and now some people might not care about some of these side quests, but I'm hoping, I guess it's ultimately up to me on when I seed the Dwerger plot though, but I do think you have to do, surely you at least do the Unseen, and then that leads to the East Haven Ferry, which is technically not a quest in here, but that's an event, because I think that builds up towards the Dwergar. Zetra, good to see you. My group did 5, and we were very invested in 10 towns by then. Yes, I think that's where I'm going with it, Liam. Not supposed to run them all. Yeah. Arl just wants to be left alone. Don't we all? Yeah, the horror feel is not really there, which is very disappointing. Just because they hyped it as a horror, Frozen North, The Thing campaign. If they hadn't advertised like that, I don't think we would have thought about it like that. But I do remember them marketing it that way. I remember like sound bites of them saying like, yeah, this is gonna be a horror themed campaign. And honestly, the only part of it that feels the least bit horror is the Caves of Hunger, which does have some cool horror bits in there. They've got like there's like a regional effect that has like nightmare things, and of course there's the vampire that hunts you down, which can be very horrific. But even things like the Black Cabin, where I thought, I saw the name Black Cabin, I was like, oh, cool, there's gonna be some kind of like horror story here, and it's not. It's so dumb, so stupid. I hate the Black Cabin. I hate the way it's written. It's just like a ghost, and it's just a trap that's designed to screw the players over and turn them, like half of them into ghosts, and then the ghosts have to interact. It's such a dumb written thing. Like, I would love to see a rewritten Black Cabin that's like, no, we're going to do a horror thing. Like, I would love it if the players, for example, the way I would do it is you're on your destination to somewhere else, and a huge blizzard comes in, and you see this cabin in the distance. Like, this is the only shelter that you've got. And the players get in there, and then like haunted horror shit starts, like Cabin in the Woods or Evil Dead or whatever, like to where it's the classic like horror story cabin, and just creepy shit's going on, but you're stuck in there. Like, just run like a little mini side quest horror adventure. I think would be really, really fun. Just as a almost, and you'd be like an encounter at that point, not even that wasn't your destination. It was just something that popped up on your way. That's how I would run the Black Cabin. And those are kind of ideas I've been having in terms of not using the stuff as written, but still using the locations, which is a big reason why I chose this campaign. Is like, at the very least, I like the maps, I like the dungeons, I like the way the art looks. Even if I'm not going to run that thing as is, I can still use the Black Cabin map and then just rewrite it as I need to. The D&D version of Multiplicity. Yes, that is kind of what I'm picturing, only with more gibbering mouthers. What do you think Aurel's main goal should be? All right, so let's go into my plans are for Aurel. So, which, by the way, I'm pronouncing it Aurel. I'm not pronouncing it O'Real. I know that's how the pronunciation guide says it, but fuck that. That sounds dumb. And I'm currently playing Icewind Dale Enhanced Edition as a Let's Play stream, and I totally heard them pronounce it Oriel, so that's how I'm going to pronounce it. In my campaign, Oriel, in fact, I can actually just read this bit. I'm going to read you my backstory. I'm trying to actually create a backstory here and really shove some lore here. Now, keep in mind, my players and I are not invested in the Forgotten Realms. We've been playing D&D for years, but in terms of knowing the world or the characters or the story, we don't really know any of that except through the context of what we've played. So the best analogy I can come up with is picture as if we were MCU fans, but not Marvel Comics fans, even though I am a Marvel Comics fan, but that's the analogy I want to make. So in other words, we know, stuff through the 5th edition campaigns, but we don't have the context for older editions or the books or any of that stuff, and only the campaigns that we've played. So I'm playing around with who Aurel is. 2,000 years ago, a Netherese wizard of Aetherin, maybe an apprentice to Irolithus, secretly completes a powerful spell by unlocking a nether scroll. That wizard was Aurel. She ascends to godhood, permanently gaining godlike magic powers. But this apotheosis draws power from the Mythalar, which is a powerful artifact that keeps the entire flying city flying, for longer than she anticipated, and that's what causes the entire floating city to crash. Happens to crash in the Arctic North, killing almost everyone in the city. Obviously, a huge, catastrophic event. Now, the crash occurred during the time where she was transforming into godhood. So, kind of a Mr. Freeze situation where she turns into, her god powers are limited to cold and winter and ice. So there's a bit of a caveat for her. Now, she's able to escape, climb out of the wreckage, and I haven't decided if she seals it up or if it just becomes sealed because of, time passed and everything. But she obviously be able to survive. She establishes herself as the goddess of winter, and the city is forgotten. That was thousands of years ago. So the big twist there is Auril is from Ithrin, which is huge. And I would love to enter in the fact that Chardalyn is maybe kryptonite to her, which could be very interesting in terms of maybe some leverage the players have. I haven't quite decided on that bit yet, but I love that connection of connecting Auril to Ithrin, so she is fully aware. Now, what I'm leaning towards is having the Arcane Brotherhood, specifically Valish Gaunt and Ness Lantomir. They are in cahoots. They're possibly lovers. I'm kind of thinking maybe a Joker-Harley situation. And, unbeknownst to the rest of the Arcane Brotherhood, he arrived into Icewind Dale trying to find stuff. He dug up some, Chardalyn, and he was able to actually discover the location of Ithrin. He confirmed the fact there was this giant hidden city under the glacier. But before he could do anything, he was arrested by Ten Towns, Bryn Shander, because he was doing other racketeering stuff. He was, he had to fund all of this, and I still had to enter in all that backstory. So it's a lot of Valish Gaunt. He gets arrested and thrown into Revel's End. Ness Lantomir escapes. Lantomir returns to the Arcane Brotherhood, steals the Professor Orb, not from Velen, but from the Brotherhood themselves. It's a powerful artifact that they all keep because it's got a lot of information. I still need to detail that out. I don't know if I want to keep it as is. I do like the fact that it's the twist is it's a goofy professor voice. I might actually keep that because that's pretty funny. She goes to the laboratory, connects the orb to the lab, which is powered by Chardalyn and everything, and mumbo jumbo arcane stuff happens, and she is able to pull up a full 3D render of Ithrin buried in the ice. Maybe learns the location of it, everything else, but learns it's also sealed off. And that is, and Auril feels that this giant arcane sonar signal gets sent out across the tundra, and it pinpoints Ithrin and maybe activates Ithrin to where it turns on, maybe the mithril starts sputtering or something happens to where even Auril's oh shit. And Auril's reaction is I gotta shut everything down. Everything gets blanketed at night and I gotta figure out what's going on. And maybe she's got agents actively looking for Ness Lantomir. And all of this is the stuff that I need to make sure I've got written in stone, because this is all backstory. Now, once the players have entered the picture, then we can obviously start doing modifications. But, what happened to Nass? I'm picturing maybe she gained some kind of powers from the thing that she did. But now she's got the location, but she still wants to break Gant out of prison. I would love to have the players show up at the prison, trying to get Gant information and find out that it's been something bad happened there, and maybe she broke him out, and really play along with having villains in the story. Wizards, why are you so bad at this? Why are you so bad at villains? I can use the MCU analogy again, I guess, because until, I guess, the last couple of years, MCU is very bad at villains too. But why is it so bad at villains? Zardarok is fine as a classic Bond villain, but then Auril's just a nobody, and then the villain of the very end of Ithrin is just the lich that nobody... no! Create fun villains that we can use, and I think Gant and Lantomir would be awesome villains to use, and obviously the Arcane Brotherhood members would all know them, so they can help, and that's part of all of what the second story is going to be, is learning about this backstory of Gant and Lantomir, and meeting Avarice, and meeting Zahn, and meeting Velen, and getting that information. So I'm very animated about that, because that's a lot of the changes that I'm going to be making. All right, back to catching up on the chat. Are you going to craft anything today, or is it just an overview? It's coming at me. No, there's probably going to be a lot of overview talk. We've got, 3 weeks until session 0. We can go over specific stuff if you all have questions about it. I do want to go over my player secrets at some point with all of you. My patrons already know what they are, although I think I need to change 1 or 2 of them. In terms of individual crafting things, like I said, we've got 4 weeks until session 1, so that will be individual crafting sessions. So if you don't want to hear about my overall plans of the campaign, you can probably skip a couple weeks worth and get to where I'm actually, building maps together and all that kind of thing. But yeah, it's a lot of kind of overview. There's a lot of work in introducing all of you to the campaign and the ideas that I've gotten. Elder Brain, you're gonna make Ceramorph's a bigger deal instead of a random Mind Flayer gang. Just because I'm using an Elder Brain does not mean I'm actually going to make it be an Illidan, Warcraft in me, an Illithid thing. I mainly just want to use the fact that they've been, in Aetherin, they extract brains to do the Futurama thing almost, except brain in the jar instead of head in the jar, to kind of keep some of them preserved. And so it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Illithids or Mind Flayers. It's just that's their big thing. And I thought an Elder Brain stat block would work best for a big version of the brain in the jar thing, which is already introduced in the campaign. So that would be my idea for having that character. And I just don't want to use a Demi-Lich because we already used a Lich. You and Chris do an amazing job DMing. Thank you, Michael. Paid for a voiceover, which like warning the story is about to hit a critical point when they went to Sunblight. That's not a bad idea. Just I do feel weird about that. Like, how do you do like that point of, because that's a big point of no return. That's the biggest one in the entire story, probably. Well, there's two. One of them is that one, which is the dragon destroying 10 towns, and the other one is entering the Caves of Hunger, because that's like we're not coming back out for the campaign purposes unless I want to do some crazy thing with like the Tarask summoning and making it a big, huge maybe tier 4 epilogue thing. I don't know, but that's also a point of no return. In other words, really the whole third story. Cabin of the Wood sounds great. Yeah. Earl's a lesser god. She wants more followers equals more power. Yeah, I need to. So right now I don't know what to do with her followers so much, because Aurel's whole motivation right now is to lock down the area because she's freaked out about Aetherin. She views Aetherin as her only weakness, because that's where she got her power from. So she doesn't want anybody to, go in there and find Aetherin. And so I imagine her main strategy is just to keep everything locked down. Maybe she's got agents out hunting for Ness Lantamir because she specifically knows that person, because that's the person who set everything off. So maybe that's what they're doing. So in other words, it doesn't really make sense for the followers who to like be running the sacrifices and that kind of thing, unless the followers who are running the sacrifices don't actually have any ties to Aurel. Like they're just zealots. It's like they're like real world worshippers. They don't have any they don't actually talk to their god or anything. It's just they have faith, and maybe that's their faith saying, oh, Aurel did this to us because she's punishing us, so we need to sacrifice people and fire and things. That I could play with that theme a lot. But Aurel's main goal is not that, and I don't like that anyway. It seems dumb. Like, why does she give a shit about sacrificing people? Like, that just seems dumb. So I'm keeping it to where the only thing Aurel mainly cares about is Aetherin, and she wants to keep it locked down. Now, the twist will be once the players actually confront her and have a showdown with her, then she can turn it around and say, okay, you all seem strong and capable enough. You are now going to go into Aetherin and destroy it for me. Like, it is, she'll play up the fact, and maybe the Arcane Brotherhood can, and maybe the players will learn that along the way too. Is like it's dangerous down there. This wizard did something to where it activated it, and it's only a matter of time before, things could break out of there. We don't know what the situation is, so go down there and destroy it. And obviously, the twist will be, she doesn't necessarily want them to destroy it, but she would go down there and maybe reacquire the rest of the Mythalar power to kind of complete her own ascension, and that would allow her to not be limited to just winter spell. So that would be the twist, is that she's telling the players to go down there and do that, because maybe she's been depowered from having to do all the. I like that, the fact that because she's blanketing the whole region at night, like she's been depowered from her normal godlike status. And then the twist will be that she shows up at the end and says, okay, now I'm gonna complete my transfer. And that would be a cool final boss battle too. And that makes it, the players have met Aurel, they know the situation, and then they'll learn in Aetherin like the backstory there and the connection, which will be really cool. and that will be a satisfying boss battle. And you can still keep the Elder Brain thing and have that be a fight, but then that would be, you know, because that frees the Mythalar for them to jack with it. And then Auril, of course, shows up and says, now I can complete my apotheosis, and the players have to fight a big battle with Auril. But, you know, keep in mind, everything I'm talking about, like a year away, if not more. You know, Tomb was 2 years, so we've got plenty of time to talk about this. The other thing I should mention is I don't think I'm going to have it be 2 years of Permanite, because that's, and I mentioned this in my last stream, that just seems crazy to me. Like 2 years. Now, if you want to play up the horror theme and the dark, isolated, like, desolation, then you could have it going that long. But to me, you're in like apocalyptic zone at that point. Like, I'm just picturing if the real world, which again, it's hard to make that analogy in a world full of magic and gods and shit, but without sunlight, like, entire ecosystems would crash. Like, I get there are places in the world that, you know, see very little sunlight for, like, you know, months at a time, but still, like, it would be, to go years would be absolutely catastrophic to a region. It would be insane. So, you know, you could do it like that, and I commend anybody who wants to do more of a dark, like, you know, people are eating each other and it's just fucking crazy at that point. But that's not what I'm going to do. Instead, it's going to be on the precipice of that. So I think I'm going to change the timeline to be a couple months, maybe like 6 months. And that's part of my timeline, is like, here's when Gaunt was arrested, here's when Ness Lantamir stole the orb and connected it and saw the Ithrin thing. And it just makes more sense to have it only happening for a couple months, which means things are starting to get bad. And plus, it just seems weird in a world where there's high-level adventurers and wizards and shit running around. Like, any catastrophe would just be handled eventually. Like, it wouldn't go on that long. Even if a lot of people don't give a shit about the Icewind Dale region, like, it just seems bizarre to me why, like, this newbie party has to show up to handle, like, and solve all the problems, unless it's only just been starting to get kind of bad and people are just starting to get rumors about, okay, these things are, you know, really bad here. So, in my game, the Permanite's only been happening for a couple months, and maybe the players will, like, see maybe the first sacrifice happening and seeing things, like, starting to get bad, which I think will give them a lot of motivation to help, you know, turn things around until the dragon burns everything down. What is the big bad evil in Ithrin then? I kind of mentioned that a second ago. I think Auril would still be the big bad. She'll show up. I'll keep the Elder Brain as just a boss fight. And I like the idea of having Avarice show up with her forces. That's going to be a really tricky one to work. I'm not sure how we're going to play that in terms of the black swords. I'm getting rid of all the demon stuff. That just feels superfluous and just too much, another spinning plate to add in there. I don't want any of that. Everything I want to have happen should tie to Ithrin and Chardalyn and all of that. Like, that makes sense. That's the connective tissue that pulls everything together. You know, the fact that the dragon that the Dwergar build is made out of Chardalyn, the fact that you know, Chardalyn is from Ithrin, the fact that Auril's from Ithrin, like, all that shit needs to be connected. The demon stuff just adds too much for me. Again, you can add, you know, in your game, you can have it all be demons is the whole thing. I've seen people that are like, oh, maybe Ithrin's on top of Levistus or something. Like, that's all cool ideas, but I'm not doing any of the demon stuff here. So I can still use the Elder Brain for a big if you think about each one having a boss fight individually, you know, the Elder Brain could be the boss fight of the third story, but I think making Auril have that last show up, and then I would have to upscale her stat block quite a bit as like a final boss fight. And who knows, maybe I add the Tarask summoning in there and we go really crazy at the end. This is an overview. Maybe list out the chapters on the screen, like on a blank page, and highlight what changes you're planning on being pressed to follow. Oh, that's a good idea. I probably should have been doing that. It makes it easier for you to skim the video too. And keep in mind, these aren't all going to be like this. This is the very first stream. I'm just talking about overall my plans with the campaign and everything. You know, this is pre-campaign prep part 1. There's going to be probably, 2 more of these. And then at some point, we'll have one that talks about my characters. Hopefully, probably the one before session 0, we'll be implementing all of my player characters and how to include them. Will probably be one whole crafting. And then obviously, once we get to the session 1 crafting, then we'll talk about, okay, here's how I'm going to start the campaign. Here's how this is, you know, going to play out. Here's the first scene and all of that. So this is, you know, so with Tomb, I didn't start crafting until we did session 1. So I'm doing things a little bit differently here, where I'm giving myself just a few more weeks of crafting so I can talk about all these changes and modifications of the overall campaign, just to help throw it out there before we actually start doing the smaller details. So for we can focus on that first tier. Played the most recent AC Valhalla. I have not. I'm still playing Persona 5 on PlayStation. I am 90-some hours in. I've been playing that game since July. I love Persona 5 to death, but it is a long game. Offered my players the option to be brains in jars. Hell yeah. That is definitely going to be an option. Again, I cannot recommend that one DM's Guild product. Expanded Towers of Magic. Specifically gives you new dungeon maps and scenarios for all 8 towers in Aethern, which is what I thought they were going to do in the book. They were going to do the Omu Shrines thing, which is very it plays it up that way, right? Because in Tomb you need the cubes to get into the final dungeon, and here you need the whatever it is, the poem, the Arcane Octad thing, a series of things you have to do, just goofy things, to get into the final dungeon, which is not obviously that big of a dungeon. But each area is just like you walk in and you just see the thing and walk out. Like there's nothing to do. So this one adds more steps. Some of them are puzzles. Some of them are combat encounters. Some of them are social encounters. One of them is just like an Ooblix, like that's really creepy. Like it's really good shit. So I plan on using that a lot and expanding Aether in that way. But still, for my campaign, remember I got to scale that up because my player's gonna be like level 13, 14, 15 for Aether. Made it on time. Welcome, Marcus. Here's Phil. To the 15th, they have a session to use their new stuff. Oh yeah. Is 15th a good level? It might be one of those deals, which this has happened 2 campaigns in a row now, because we're about to hit level 20 in our current campaign, and we're only going to be there for 1 session for the final battle. And same thing happened with Tomb, where I believe they hit level 11 for only that final battle in the session. I think it'll be the same deal here, where they may hit like 15 for the final encounter or something. I'll have to see the minute details on leveling. I do still plan on using Milestone, by the way. I do love awarding XP, but it's just Milestone is just so easy. It's just one less thing to worry about in terms of the level scaling and making sure everybody's at a decent level. I think the one problem we had with Milestone last time, as I mentioned with Tomb, is I didn't level them up enough. I kept them in those low levels for dozens of sessions, and it was not paced very well. So here, I'm going to try to do a better job of that. And I think it even mentions in the text about, let's see, where does it mention it? In terms of the level scaling. Yeah, so Chapter 1, 1st to 4th level characters. Chapter 2, I believe, is 4th to 6th, the way it's scaled, which is just all the Revel's End and Korkaluk and the Goliath tribe. It's all the bigger areas outside of it. It's the open world, essentially. I'm going to definitely pull from Chapter 2 to fill all the rest of my sections up until, obviously, the players go into the Caves of Hunger. So I'm hoping to separate that stuff out, which means I will need to upscale some of that stuff as well. And I'm hoping to maybe delay like the Lost Spire and those things to where they make more sense to do in the second story rather than the first story. I really am thinking of them as like 3 different stories. Sunblight 4th or 5th. See, I actually wrote down my own notes for where I'm going to level everybody up. So I think, yeah, 4th or 5th, and then Destruction's Light at 6th. So I think I'm actually keeping all of that, where by the time they start, so actually that first story arc, which completes with the Dwerger plot, they'll be 6th level, and they'll make 7th level, I believe, after the Shardland Dragon. So, but I'm going to stretch it out to where it's 7 to 11 with that second story, where they go to Revel's End, and they go to the Lost Spire, and to Gaunt's Laboratory, which I have a map for that. And then they end up at the Island of Solstice and Grimskala for, like, what did I say, level 10 and 11. Probably level 10. And so then when they finish Grimskala, they'll be level 11, and then they'll be 11 for, maybe even 12 for the Caves of Hunger. which I have to slightly scale that up because Caves of Hunger are designed for 8th level. So that'll be a big part. So we're going to keep the level range generally intact for the first third, and then the other 2 is going to be changed quite a bit. Steel Witch idea. Sick. Schedule Filthy Mortal Coil. If I offered my players the Brave Brains in charge, they definitely take the offer. You know, I really like that there's one NPC that I believe is a brain in the jar on top of like a helmed horror or something. That's awesome. That's like Kang from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, although I think Kang was in the chest. But that's a really fun idea for a character. But that'd be really funny. It's also an interesting way if a player dies somewhere in that late game, you could say like, oh, maybe your brain is preserved and you can turn them in. You know, that'd be a really neat story modification to allow a character to stay on as a brain in a jar. But then you would hook them up to something, maybe they have their choice. You know, maybe you can hook them onto a some kind of robot spider or something to have mobility in some way. Oh, for the dragon that burns 10 downs. I don't think I would need to modify. Like I said, the least amount of modification is this first third. I'm obviously using some quests and not using others, but the least amount of work and level scaling and all that will be for this first third area. Which, by the way, I can show you guys my landing screen. So since we're wrapping things up, we're getting close to the hour mark. I can tell you, for the beginning, I've already sent my players the prep notes, which tells them the situation in Icewind Dale. Lets them know obviously it takes place in Icewind Dale. I mentioned the factions that are involved, so I can have my players kind of have ideas for characters that would fit well. And what's funny is, you know, I was talking to Raymond about his character ideas. He's like, oh, I don't know if, you know, the idea I had is going to work. And I'm like, keep in mind that Chris played a noir detective for a campaign that took place entirely in the jungle. That is the most extreme example of having a character that is not at all like maximized for that adventure, and it still worked. And guess what? Mannix was one of the fan favorite characters. So I'm reassuring my players, like, look, play whatever you want. I'm just letting you know, here are the things that you will encounter. Here are the factions you'll encounter. Here are the ties you might want to make yourself. But play whatever you want, and then I will, you know, we'll come up together with those connections we can make, and make it work. And you know, and I think the fish out of water thing is even a enjoyable trope on its own. Like, you can definitely have a character that would never be caught dead in this region, and that could be a really fun character to play. So I would say, like, don't worry about those connections, but I definitely do want to make those connections. And with a 3-way fight for control of the Mythor. Yes. Yeah, because, and I'd love, you know, that's such a cool thing of having, again, you want those villains, you know, think about all the cool stories where you end up in a lost city, you know, like an Uncharted game, or, you know, Indiana Jones. You know, in Indiana Jones, I'm thinking like the third one specifically because it's such a D&D fucking adventure, that last, the classic, you know, Penitent Man and all that stuff, has the Nazis there as the villains. It's not that they're just exploring this dungeon on their own. There are established villains there, and they are important in the story. And that would be a cool thing to add to Etherin, is through like Avarice's army showing up, and having you know, Oral turn on them, like having things that aren't just waiting for the players in Etherin, but having them show up with the players, you know, with an obviously antagonistic bent, could be really satisfying. But to do that, and I get that it's hard because you need villains that aren't going to be early defeated by the players in some way, and that's going to be a tricky thing to do. But thankfully, Oral can do that. Again, I've got Gant and Lantamir in my pocket. I'm not sure at all how to use Avarice and the Black Swords. We're going to have to talk about that in the future, because I don't know, other than the fact that I don't want to do the Demon Tie. I just want to have the Chardalyn thing. We also need to talk about Chardalyn still, because I need to come up with rules for Chardalyn. I want to have Chardalyn be an important part of the campaign. The Dwergar are using it. I like the idea of having it be kind of kryptonite to Oral, and obviously all of it comes from Etherin, which is how you know, the players are going to start learning about this, you know, ancient crash city. But I like the idea of the Chardalyn Berserkers, of Chardalyn having this mind warping effect on people, but also some folks are able to wield Chardalyn as powerful items that they can use. So I need to come up with some kind of rule scheme for that. Maybe it's like a save or a check if you want to wield any of these things. other than just being like a story thing. And then how do I use Avarice's crew that she's kind of infiltrated and maybe eventually takes over the Black Swords, which are all about using Chardalyn as so maybe she also obviously wants to find Ithrin and then weaponize the Chardalyn and realize, each of them, Valen wants to find it for, I'll probably make her generally a good guy, but she wants to find it for the research purposes and just about, knowledge for the Brotherhood. Avarice becomes obsessed with the Chardalyn and thinks this is important shit. We can like build magic items out of this and power. And then Dazan found the cloning thing and is like, oh man, we can use these, facilities as really powerful things. And that, basically plays up all the Arcane Brotherhood have important parts in the story. And by visiting them and interacting with them, the players can learn more about Ithrin. But I would like to keep Avarice as a wild card that I could have her show up near the end with hopefully an army of, Chardalyn weapon wielding people, which could be really cool. But then how do you do the Caer Dineval event with the Black Swords and have the players show up there? It's a very tricky thing to run, and we'll definitely be getting there. Another Tim. Everybody likes the Tim. Like the Warforged. But to begin the campaign, real quick, I'm going to have them, similar to Tomb, they'll be arriving in Icewind Dale. You can see I've actually put them on the map as, I need to scroll down a bit, as this little D&D icon. I did mention in my prep document that I would like some of them to be from Icewind Dale originally. And we're starting at level 2 because level 1's bullshit. Like it's the tutorial newbie level. We don't need to do level 1 anymore. Just hard to stop. So starting at level 2. And the idea is the ones that were from Icewind Dale, they left to pursue their adventuring careers and make it to level 2, but then they heard about this horrible permanite thing befalling their home region and wanted to come back and, check up on things. And the ones that weren't from Icewind Dale, are hopefully connected to those other players and wanted to come with them. Or maybe if somebody is like the Descendant escaped prisoner, maybe they just found them in the snow, which we're out of time, so we're going to have to talk about player secrets next time. But and the idea is they will they're traveling on the way to Bryn Shander, and then the first session that I will actually run will be the Foaming Mugs map. I'll show that right at the end here, because I realize I've done a lot of talking and just staring at the Icewind Dale map. This is a map I got from, I believe, Evantier Games. I used their DM's Guild expanded thing for, I forget what it's called, but it's got a lot of extra notes and maps for, I mainly got it for the maps for Rime of the Frost Maiden. But they will basically have this encounter on the way to Bryn Shander, because I wanted to start with an action-packed introduction, kind of similar to Tomb. Although Tomb actually wasn't until session 2 where we actually got to the action part of it. I did too much story intro at the beginning. So in this case, I'm gonna do it in reverse. I'm gonna start with the action. They're on their way. The permanite happens. A blizzard happens. They come out of the blizzard. They see these dwarves that have been attacked by a yeti. Very thematic. And it turns out it's a bunch of goblins because it's level 2. But should be just a fun way to get people in the feel for their characters and have this encounter. Have a situation they can work with whatever way they want. And then after that, they will make their way to Bryn Shander, and then I will do a big story dump. I plan on having the Council of Speakers happening, although only half the speakers are there because things are starting to get bad. And some of them, like the one from Goodmead, is dead. The players don't know that, and others are just not showing up. They're saying the small towns are starting to shut down. This thing has been happening for months. And in my campaign, the small towns will be the first ones to revert to like tribalism and sacrifice and everything. The big towns are so far keeping it together. But things are starting to get bad, and they'll get some of the quests initially. They'll get the Goodmead quest, which is, hey, a shipment was supposed to come here and it hasn't, so maybe go check up on Goodmead. And the speaker from Tourmaline will be at the Council of Speakers, and he'll say, hey, a bunch of kobolds moved into the mine. Can you help us with that? And the players will actually be offered a job of, do you want to be official 10 Towns agents that the speaker will offer them? And in doing so, they will get to see this map, which I realize I'm just now showing you my landing page. But I don't plan on showing this until probably session 2 when the players actually get to see this. They'll gather around the table and actually get this map. And this will be our new landing page going forward that we'll first see whenever we jump on there. But that'll be their group patron, essentially, is working for Speaker Shane, or really for all of the 10 Towns regions. And that's how they will be, hired on. They'll be like, hey, you'll get a per diem, you'll get free stay in all the towns. but you need to basically help us. Like, your job is to go around and helping us. You are like the federal agents for the 10 towns region. You're going to be given authority, to help in these situations as arbiters. It's kind of maybe not quite all of that right at the beginning, because the players, they haven't really proved themselves much. They've only just, helped a bunch of dwarves and showed up here, but it's desperate times, and the speaker will be like, look, it's. And again, hopefully some of them are from Icewind Dale, so the players can be like, hey, I recognize you, and I know you're good people, and I just, trust you guys to be able to handle or help us handle what's going on here, because while we're trying to figure out how we can solve it, we have all these little issues popping up in the towns because of this catastrophe that is happening, which is similar to how maybe Port Nyanzaru ran for the first couple sessions of Tomb, but here it's going to be expanded over, several sessions and most of those low levels and getting through those quests. And then whenever they go to one area or another, they'll get the mountain climb quest, which I can put that in any town where they can learn. They'll actually learn a rumor that a previous adventuring party was hired to go to Kelvern's Cairn, which is going to be Dazan. Hired a party to go up there so he could find the Lost Spire. So I'll be seeding all those things in there, and obviously you can do the Cora's Lost thing, where her son found a piece of Chardalin and went off to Caer Dinevel. I can seed that in there. So I'll just start seeding all these little things throughout those first couple sessions, and then eventually, tease the Dwargar and the Invisible Thieves, and then that'll lead to, ideally the Unseen in Caer Konig would be the first of those quests, which then leads to the East Haven Ferry, which then leads to Sunblight. But I gotta be careful when I introduce that, because you don't want to do Sunblight too soon. You want to be able to have them do mountain climb and Beautiful Mine and Good Mead, ideally before all of that. So that's a lot of talking, and that has been an hour of me talking about our Rime of the Frost Maiden campaign. So I think that is going to do it for our first publicly live streamed crafting Icewind Dale session. Again, these pre-campaign preps will be a little bit different because it's a whole lot of stuff to talk about, but I just talked about a whole lot of stuff, so now we can start getting into the more minutia stuff. We still need to talk about player secrets and all these things for character creation, and there's still a lot more to talk about. We've got a few more of these to go until our session 0, which is on April 30th. Session 0, April 30th. And then session 1 on May 7th, but I'll still be doing these craftings every week at the same time on Thursdays. So thank you all so much for joining me. This was a lot of fun talking to all of you and going over my campaign. I've had this inside of me for months and months, and it feels so good to be able to burst it out onto all of you. I hope you brought an umbrella. If you do like the content and the channel, please do check out patreon.com/RogueWatson. If you're watching this live, then I will see you all for D&D tomorrow as we start wrapping up Chris's campaign. But otherwise, if you're watching this in the future, you can skip on ahead to the next crafting. See you there for that. Have a good one.